This is Dr. Esther Legend. I want to talk about the war in Iran and the fact that Iran cannot have nuclear weapons ever. Therefore, we need regime change in Iran. I want to go into the legality of what is going on regarding Donald Trump's use of troops and of air power. This concerns the controversial War Powers Act of 1973, which was passed by Congress after the war in Vietnam. So, the President, according to the War Powers Act, the President is supposed to notify Congress within 48 hours after committing troops. And supposedly he's got a 60-day limit. But to my knowledge, it's never been enforced, and I'm aware of the fact that President Clinton went beyond the 60-day limit and nothing ever happened to him. So, now, what does the Constitution say? We have Article 1, Section 8. Gives Congress the power to declare war. And a little bit later, I'm going to go through the declared wars of Congress. There have been 5 declared wars, although there have been numerous other, more than 5 declarations, but only concerning 5 specific wars. Now we have the power of the President. In Article 2, the President shall be Commander-in-Chief of all of the armed forces. And the President has sent troops many times and has conducted bombing raids many times. This War Powers Act, there is a constitutional issue here. And the issue, in my opinion, as an attorney, still constitutional law, is we have a separation of powers issue. We have the fact that this War Powers Act, we have Congress now limiting the power of the President. You can't undeclare a war, and that's what Congress is attempting to do. If Congress wants to limit the powers of the President as to the Commander-in-Chief, you better change the Constitution. Otherwise, this War Powers Act, in my opinion, is unconstitutional. Supreme Court has never ruled on the constitutionality of this law. Now, regarding the war in Iran now. We've been in a war with Iran since November 4th, 1979. That's when they took over our embassy in Tehran. And they did this for 444 days until President Reagan got them to release our hostages, our people that were at our embassy. And this took place in January 20th, 1981. Iran is the regime there supports international terrorism. It's been the #1 terrorist state since 1979. They have also funded and supported Hezbollah and Hamas and the Assad regime, which was responsible for 500,000 people dying in the Syrian civil war. You cannot trust these people with nuclear weapons. Therefore, if they're not going to cooperate, then we need a regime change. There is nothing to negotiate with the present people in Iran because of the fact that if they want nuclear weapons, this is not a possibility. Okay? Now, I want to briefly talk about nuclear weapons because people don't pay too much attention to, well, they're going to have nuclear weapons or not have nuclear weapons. By the way, numerous presidents since 1979 have tried to deal with Iran unsuccessfully. In my opinion, Donald Trump is the first president that has changed things around regarding Iran. And of course, he gets criticized for it. Well, whatever he does, he gets criticized for it. So let me talk briefly about nuclear weapons and the threat of nuclear weapons. Supposedly, we have 12,331 nuclear warheads in the world. At one time during the Cold War, we had 80,000. It's been reduced. Let me go through some of the information. Russia has 5,459. United States, 5,277. China, 600. France, 290. United Kingdom, 225. India, 180. Pakistan, 170. Supposedly, It's unconfirmed that Israel has 90 and North Korea 50. Now, in my opinion, I think a number of these countries shouldn't have nuclear weapons because of the fact that we've got a procedural. Okay. Anyway, we have the concept of nuclear winter. Nuclear winter is where a number of nuclear weapons go off and you've got a supreme dust cloud and you go into the beginning stages of nuclear winter. It's been estimated you only need 100 nuclear weapons blasts to begin a nuclear winter. It's also been estimated that if you have 1,000 nuclear blasts, we're done. The entire planet will be covered by dust. People will die from the blast, from the firestorm, from the radiation, from what's called fallout, the nuclear waste material. It's going to get in the air, the water, the ground. It's going to contaminate everything. And humanity will be done for. That's why I think, in the old days, it was the United States and the Soviet Union having nuclear weapons. And there was an equalization. Now you have, for example, India and Pakistan. They have 350 nuclear weapons. They fought 4 wars. China and India fought 3 wars. China has 600. India has 180. Do you trust these people? I don't. I certainly don't trust Iran having nuclear weapons. And let me say briefly something about nuclear weapons. Unfortunately, we have the Hiroshima event. The blast was measured at what's called 30,000 kilotons. Nuclear weapons today are in the area of 300 to 600,000 kilotons. That is 10 to 20 times the size of the blast at Hiroshima. And then we have some weapons up to a megaton range. And we've miniaturized nuclear weapons, whereas in the past, a weapon could be 10,000 pounds. Now they can be 300 pounds. Therefore, you can miniaturize them. You can put multiple weapons inside a missile, up to 6 or 8 of them, and independently target them. One missile gets through, you can take out 8 separate categories, 8 separate cities. And of course, we have the nuclear waste, radioactive iodine, strontium, cesium, plutonium. These things are all deadly. So Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon because they're a terrorist state, or they could give it to their proxies. This is non-negotiable, and now we're up to the point of regime change. And I predicted this a good number of years ago when I said, sooner or later, we're going to go to the regime change scenario because of the danger inherent in the regime. They only want nuclear weapons. So Trump has history on his side. By bombing Iran, I do not believe he's going to put boots on the ground. Everyone's fearful of this, but he hasn't yet. I don't think he will. And I think his use of force will be very limited. A week, 10 days, 2 weeks at the most. And what he's done in collaboration with the Israelis is take out the main leadership in Iran, which we did last June, what the Israelis did last June. And if necessary, we'll do this a number of times. The Israelis were highly successful in doing this against Hezbollah. They took out the supreme leader there, then the substitute came in, they took him out, then there was the next one, they took him out. So after a while, anybody that's a leader, they're going to be paranoid, they're going to be spending all their time hiding because they're going to be next. So the only answer is some kind of regime change. It can't get any worse. Now let me talk about the so-called declared wars that the United States has entered into, which were okayed by Congress. And everyone points to Congress's power to declare a war. Well, there have been 5 declared wars. There have been more declarations than 5, but the fact that maybe there were 12 declarations, it only concerns the 5 specific wars. And some of these are questionable. The War of 1812, President Madison, June 18th, 1812, against Great Britain. And the reason for this war was the fact that the British were kidnapping our sailors and they were preventing us from having trade with France. Not everybody in Congress was on board. In the House of Representatives, the vote was 79 to 49. In the Senate, the vote was 19 to 13. Supposedly up to 15,000 of our troops died in the War of 1812, and almost all of them died from disease rather than being killed in action. I think this was a question, if you go back and do the history, this was a war we could have avoided. Congress passed it. You know, there's this belief that, well, if Congress passes a war, this has to be a genuinely valid war. In this case, the War of 1812, I don't think so. Then we have the Mexican-American War of April of 1846 to February of 1848 under President Polk. The declaration of war was May 13th, 1848. The issue was simply, did Mexican troops cross our border or did our troops cross their border? To this date, nobody's totally sure. In fact, Congressman Lincoln wanted to get a resolution passed to find out exactly who crossed which border. But Congress wasn't very much interested in that. The House of Representatives voted 174 to 14. The Senate voted 40 to 2 to go to war. Over 12,000 of our troops died, mostly all from disease. This war could have been avoided. However, the United States wound up with Texas, New Mexico, Utah, California, Nevada, and a good part of Colorado. So I guess you could say historically the United States benefited. But the big question is, where was the spot? Who crossed whose border? This is another one, in my opinion, a questionable war declared by Congress. Then we have another questionable war, again declared by Congress. Oh, these are geniuses. The old Spanish-American War under President McKinley, April 24th, April 21st to August 13th, 1898. Passed the House by 311 to 4, the Senate not so much, 42 to 35. It simply involved, we had a battleship in Cuba, and the battleship was sunk. To this day, there's various opinions as to who exactly sunk the battleship. Was it the Spanish? Was it the Cubans? Maybe it was us. Whatever. 400 Americans died in this war in combat. Thousands and thousands died from disease. This was another one of these wars that probably could have been avoided. The newspapers at the time, the yellow journalists, as they were called, wanted us to go to war. So we went to war. Another kind of stupid war, again passed by Congress. I guess they know what they're doing. As a result, we got Cuba, the Philippines, and Puerto Rico. Eventually, we gave Cuba and the Philippines their independence, and today Puerto Rico is a territory of the United States. So I've just presented 3 wars. I think all 3 of these could have been avoided. Then we have World War I. The war started in 1914. We didn't get involved until April 6, 1917, until the end, November 11th, 1918. And the reason that we went to war was that the German submarines started sinking our ships. This was under President Wilson. The vote was 373 to 50 in the House and 82 in the Senate. It's not always unanimous. Could World War I been avoided? Maybe. I'll give this a maybe one. Because we lost 117,000 troops killed and another 200,000 wounded. And almost 5 million people served in the military. World War I, with the other parties involved, I characterize this as a senseless, stupid war. And it led to the Versailles Treaty, which was a disaster, which then gets into the causes for World War II. So just because Congress declares a war doesn't necessarily it's a good idea. But probably the only one that Congress got right was World War II, when Japanese attacked us on December 7th, 1941 in Pearl Harbor. We declared war next day, December 11th, 1941. And, we declared war on December 8th, 1941. And we made another declaration on December 11th, 1941, when Germany declared war against us. Fortunately, all of Congress voted to go to war. Unfortunately, we lost about 400,000 troops dead, close to 700,000 wounded, and 15 million served in the military. So those are our declared wars. I got 3 listed as, I don't think so. World War I, maybe. And the only one that maybe the Congress got right was World War II. So again, just because you put the war powers in the hands of Congress doesn't mean they're going to get it right. Now let me talk about wars that were handled totally by the president as commander-in-chief. I'm going to take it from the modern period. So let's start with President Reagan. We have the war in Grenada, where on October 25th, 1983, he sent 7,600 troops to this island in the Caribbean to prevent a communist takeover. 19 of our soldiers were killed, 116 wounded. And then we have, under Reagan, the bombing of Libya on April 14th, 1986. Again, he sent troops in one example, and then he bombed in another. So far, President Trump has only bombed Iran. I do not believe he's going to send any troops. Then we have Bush, Senior Bush, the war in Panama, December 1989. The purpose was to apprehend Manuel Noriega, the dictator, on drug charges, and his brother. It's called Operation Just Cause. 23 of our soldiers died, 300 were wounded. And then we have the infamous Gulf War, beginning August 2nd, 1990, when Saddam Hussein of Iraq invaded Kuwait. Operation Desert Storm. 300 troops were killed, 467 wounded, and we had almost 700,000 troops sent to Iraq. And then we have President Clinton. And we have the war in Somalia, the capital Mogadishu. There had been a famine there, and we sent food there, and the warlords in Somalia, they're still the warlords there now, they stole the food. Then we sent troops. Actually, some of the troops were sent under President Bush. Ultimately, 28,000 troops. And this whole misadventure is depicted in the book Black Hawk Down and the movie, where 18 of our servicemen were killed and a good number of others, I think about 90, were wounded. And then we had President Clinton's air campaign in Bosnia, Operation Deliberate Force. And this was August to September 1995, bombing Bosnia, the Serbian part. And we flew 2,318 sorties. That means that number of planes went and let go their bombs. And then Clinton further, this is his third adventure, Kosovo in 1999, another bombing campaign, March to June. It's estimated we flew 10,000 missions against the Serbs, who were technically had invaded Kosovo. I'm just trying to go through the various times our president as commander-in-chief has sent troops and has bombed various countries. Now we have George W. Bush, the younger, 9/11, where 3,000 people were killed by Al-Qaeda, directed by Osama bin Laden. He had used Afghanistan as a sanctuary, and he was protected by the local terrorists there, the Taliban. So in October 2001, President Bush sent troops to Afghanistan. And we kept troops in Afghanistan for 20 years. Eventually, we rotated around, at the highest number, about 30,000 troops were sent there. 626 were killed, 2,656 wounded. And we also had an extensive bombing campaign. That war ended when President Biden withdrew our troops from Afghanistan, and not necessarily in the greatest fashion. And then we have the Iraq War by George W. Bush, allegedly because Saddam Hussein allegedly had weapons of mass destruction, which began on March 20th, 2003. Ultimately, we captured Saddam Hussein. We ultimately sent 170,000 troops, and 4,200 troops were killed, a significant number, 31,000 wounded. And we were there from 2003, from the Bush administration, all the way to 2011 in the Obama administration. And both of them engaged in sending troops. They both sent troops there, and they both did extensive bombing campaigns in Iraq. And the largest battle there was called the Second Battle of Fallujah, in which many of our troops were killed and many were wounded. And then the last individual I'm going to talk about, president that committed troops, that engaged in bombing campaigns. And the first example on President Obama was that he sent troops, Delta Force, to May 1st, 2011 to Pakistan to kill Osama bin Laden. And by the way, this was authorized by the National Security Council. I think there were 12 people on the National Security Council, and I believe the vote was 11-1. The vice president, I think you know his name, he was the only one that voted against it. What can I tell you? And then we had Libya under President Obama, where he bombed Libya. 2011, we flew 5,316 sorties, Operation Unified Protection, Protector. That's a lot of bombing, authorized by President Obama. I don't even know if he had to oblige by the War Powers Act. And in 2014, he got involved in the war against ISIS in Syria and Iraq. He sent several hundred troops. 100 of them were killed. And we flew, and this is somewhat questionable. At the minimum, we flew 2,000 sorties, and it's a possibility it went up to 50,000 sorties. We don't know the total number. This was called Operation Inherent Resolve. So what I'm saying here is that we have wars passed by Congress, the 5 wars, although the 12 declarations, and the majority of them are questionable. And then we have, in the modern period, I didn't even go into the older period, but in the modern period, we've got, from Reagan on through Obama, I stopped there, we've got presidents who have committed troops, engaged in bombing campaigns, and they've done this because the president is the commander-in-chief, and he has the authority to do this. From Reagan to Obama, and now President Trump. And there's been some opposition already opposition has taken place to whether or not this is a good idea. Members of Congress, and there's always going to be opposition to whatever Trump does. But in my opinion, legal opinion, from Reagan through Trump, including Obama, all of these things were done legally because the president is commander-in-chief of the military. And in the modern period, he's got every right to send troops and to bomb places. I mean, it's not a great idea, but He's got the power to do this. And if you leave it up to Congress, can they agree on anything? I mean, the last time they declared war was in December of 1941. I don't know if Congress will ever declare a war. Now let me just go back to reiterate some things concerning what we're doing in Iran in conjunction, United States and Israel. Taking out their leadership element. Destroying their missile capability. I just read today where they took out their entire navy. They want to neuter this country. They cannot have nuclear weapons. And the reason for that is too many countries have nuclear weapons. And why do they want nuclear weapons? Because they might use them. Maybe some of the other countries. I was concerned about this whole situation with Iran after the last bombing campaign last June, was the possibility of them acquiring nuclear weapons from North Korea, another bad actor country that should not have nuclear weapons. If they can't make a nuclear weapon, maybe they can acquire from one of the other nuclear powers. And the one I was thinking about was North Korea. So, look, the other thing is, we only know what the news is telling us. I'm fairly expert in this area, but I don't have all the information that the government has. And I think the threat was probably from Iran was much greater than we're all led to believe. And they're not telling us everything. And, that goes without saying. The problem, again, with nuclear weapons is these weapons are so much more powerful than Hiroshima. And we don't want to, once you have one or two go off, then there's the likelihood of more and more, and then you're going to go into a nuclear winter. And if you go into a nuclear winter, you're going to have a bad result for humanity. Nuclear weapons are an existential threat to humanity. In my opinion, it's the only existential threat today. Now, climate change, people talk about that, and, things of that nature. It's not an existential threat now. Maybe in the future and maybe not. Global warming, maybe now or maybe in the future, but who knows. But nuclear weapons tomorrow, today, yesterday. All right, this is Dr. S. the Legend. Hope you enjoy my podcast. It's presented by Conversations with Dr. S. the Legend. This is me. Also, if you want to reach me with any comments, you can contact me at my email. Furthermore, see these beautiful paintings here? Western scenes, rodeo scenes, cowboy scenes. These are all available at this website for your viewing, and they're for sale. This is a commercial.
Read your email.
This is the email, and this is the website. Again, let me again show you my email. You can contact me. This is Dr. S. the Legend, signing off.
Good.